Hey, Arnie, how are you today?
I'm good, Scott, and I'm looking forward to our show today.
Me too.
Talking about all the issues related to the upcoming delisting of grizzly bears.
Yeah.
And the impact on Montana and the Rocky Mountain region. And we have some experts joining us in a while to talk about that. But it reminded me of a couple of incidents from my recent Alaska trip.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
You know, part of the dialogue around grizzly bears is conservationists, you know, versus folks that are hunters and, you know, want to, you know, either responsibly or irresponsibly, you know, hunt bears. There have been bear poaching incidents. A couple of years ago, we were right around a Missoula area. They arrested and fined people for killing 6 bears illegally. So there's issues on both sides, but I can tell that one of the underpinnings of all this is climate change and the changing environment that folks are operating in. And when I was in Alaska, it was never more apparent to me when I was moving around and looking at all of the beautiful scenery and looking at the wildlife and talking about hunting and fishing, how things have changed so rapidly. For example, when I was in Ketchikan, and I went with an experienced fishing guide, and he took me to a spot where you could fish for halibut.
Wow!
And we spent the whole day, and there were about 9 boats in the general area. They don't get very close to each other.
Right.
Not a single boat had caught a halibut, and he revealed that you know, the water is warming up and the schools of fish are moving, and you know that's part of a ecological food chain because they're moving. It
affects everything.
Yeah, the whales move. The other, you know, the whole process moves.
Right.
When I went and took a look at the glaciers, I was in one of the fjords.
Right.
That is 60 miles long. So the ice has carved its way 60 miles in. And as I was there, you know, looking out, there were, you know, the glacier was, you know, going through the process of I feel calving.
Right.
So large sheets of ice, some of them the size of office buildings, were falling off. And one of the people that I was with commented that he was there back in the 60s in that same fjord.
Right.
And it was miles
further
back. It had deteriorated miles. And, you know, to see that firsthand and hear about it firsthand and hear about the, you know, the fish migrating. Right. I heard it at the Missoula Farmers Market last Saturday.
Right.
You know, I was buying some halibut, and the guy at the concession said it's getting very tough to get halibut. It's been a very poor season because we can't find them. They're continuing to move, and so this debate is more than just, you know, used to be called tree huggers. It's now called snowflakes.
Right.
In fact, I had somebody recently call me a snowflake.
Really?
I don't look like a snowflake.
No, you don't.
I don't act like a snowflake.
But what was the issue?
I was talking about, you know, global climate change, and they were commenting that there isn't any climate. You know, there is no global warming.
Right.
There is no climate change. It's all just natural cycles, and you know, it's gone through it before, and it's not man-made. It was somebody take a strident position, and you know, and I said, well, that's not true. 99% of the scientists in the world and all the studies said, well, you're just snowflake.
Right.
You know, you're just a tree hugger. And I responded with John Cleese's comment about that. John Cleese said, you know, he said the concept of snowflakes are it's a sociopath's attempt to discredit the notion of empathy.
Yeah.
You know, if you're empathetic to anything, you're a snowflake. If you're concerned about children locked up in cages. Right. It doesn't matter legal, illegal, you know, whether there's rules or, I mean, you got children. Right. Hundreds and hundreds of kids, thousands of kids. Right. In cages, and people saying, they shouldn't be here. We shouldn't, get rid of them. I mean, where's the empathy? Where's the concern? So this issue, hopefully, is more of a, factual one and doesn't get, hopefully does not get, I guess, enmeshed in this strident, argument of, liberal, conservative. You're a snowflake. You're not, you're not into, people's hunting rights and all that sort of thing.
Right. Well, our guest is Blake Nicolazzo, and she'll be talking about this. And I realize that this whole delisting kind of controversy is going to be coming to a head later this summer when...
in September it's supposed to take effect.
Right. But I think that there are a lot of events that are coming up in the next couple of weeks that are really going to shine a much stronger kind of light on this. And so we'll figure out where things stand, and we'll get her perspective. And she's one of the people and we've had her on the air before with Strongwater back a couple of years ago when she was working with Strongwater, and still is, by the way. She also is very good at presenting why the other side feels the way they feel. So she'll give us much of a balanced perspective on this.
Good.
So
I'm looking forward to it.
It'll be a good conversation. We'll be back after this with Blake. Okay, and we are back with our guest, Blake Nicolazzo, who, by the way, brought in a bag of tricks. Right? You see that, don't you, Arnie?
Yes, I do.
She's got to speak right into the mic.
This is embarrassing already.
No, we're not going to embarrass you.
Bag of tricks, I will cut you.
By the way, that's a famous statement of someone else we know.
Yes. So,
cut
Blake,
you 4 ways.
Give us the overview of what's happening related to the delisting of grizzly bears.
Okay, well, first we should talk about the delisting as it applies to the greater Yellowstone grizzly bear population.
Right.
That specific population has been removed from the endangered species list, which means that it is no longer protected federally. And the management of the animal has moved to the states in which the bears reside. Currently, the greater Yellowstone area is Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming.
And as I did a little bit of background search, at one point the grizzly bear population was around 50,000 bears. And now we're talking about it being delisted when the population is maybe 600 to 1,000?
So the population in the GYE, Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem, is estimated at 717. And it's really hard to tell if that, quote, estimate is real.
Right.
What if it's far less than that? Some scientists say that it might be 50% of that.
Right, and that's across 21,000 square miles, right?
That's a good fact. I can't confirm it.
Wait a minute, Blake, how did you get involved? Let's start from the beginning, though. How did you get involved in this?
Gosh, I mean,
tell us who you are a little bit for our audience.
Okay, so I'm Blake Nicolazzo,
right.
And I am the creative director and founder of Bonfire Branding and Communications.
Right.
We are a very small branding agency here in Missoula, Montana, and my background has always had some type of conservation in it. As a child, I was an animal activist.
Right.
And so it's really come into my professional life because of a lifelong commitment to conservation issues.
Okay.
So in this case, Bonfire was hired by Dr. David Mattson and his wife, Louisa Wilcox. They live here in Montana outside the park, outside of Yellowstone Park.
Okay.
David is a lifelong bear biologist. And he is one of the very few people in the field today who actually speaks the truth. Because unfortunately, when people who are in the government speak the truth about, objecting to this trophy hunt, for instance, that's set for Wyoming, they're gone. I mean, if you look at what happened to Dan Wank, the former, now he will be retiring early because he spoke up against the trophy hunt of grizzlies. And I know of another official in Washington who spoke up against this trophy hunt. They're both gone from their posts.
And who is responsible for removing them?
Well, it's complicated, and the federal government at the end of the day is responsible for removing and or placing an animal on the endangered species
right.
list.
But who is the chief executive? Isn't that Ryan Sankey? Isn't it our former Isn't it our former congressman? Really? Who's responsible for that?
We don't know the answer, but one might suppose that it is.
Yes.
But putting that aside,
that would take some more research because I know it's a group, but ultimately the federal government, so like Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, they are responsible for executing the orders.
Or in this case, executing the bears.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a trophy hunt, guys, and this is the first time that bears have been able to be hunted for sport in 44 years. And if we even go to the 10,000-foot level regarding trophy hunting and the psychology behind that,
right?
It's my belief that we're dealing with some, and I'll get skewered for this, but this is a mental health issue. When you are going out to slaughter something intentionally for fun,
right? I
think you probably need to back up a few steps and check yourself.
Right. But this isn't for hunting. When they were poaching bears in Montana a few years ago, they only took a small amount of meat out of the bear and they just left the carcasses.
Oh, yeah. Grizzly bears are not. This isn't sustenance hunting.
No.
And anyone who says it is just kind of like.
This is all about the kill.
Around the issue.
Is lying.
Yeah.
This is about the kill.
This is about turning live, sentient beings into mounts and rugs.
Right.
This is for ego. This is not leading with love. This is not compassionate living. This is not subsistence hunting. It is entirely different. I mean, you go out and shoot a deer or an elk, you take that animal for your family and you honor that animal and you are spiritually connected to that being.
Right.
That's one thing. But this is, unfortunately, a group of people who get joy and gain pleasure.
The psychology of killing is somehow meshed in with the hunt.
Well, for sure.
Right.
And actually, I just read a very recent article from Psychology Today around why men trophy hunt. We've seen some cases recently of American women. There's an American woman who went and killed a very rare black giraffe. And so there are women certainly who trophy hunt too. But the vast majority of these men are wealthy, white, elite men. And what this study found,
Barney,
and we can,
Barney, sure.
Yeah, give me a gun. I'm going to shoot that giraffe,
and then you'll feel better.
Yeah,
you'll feel better.
The snowflake.
But the vast majority of the people, like this study, basically indicated that the reason that men want to trophy hunt is to show that they can afford the loss.
Right.
It's extraordinarily expensive. A non-resident tag in Wyoming will go for $6,000. That's just to have the right to kill the bear. Then most of these guys are going to go with an outfitter. And I don't know the range of what an outfitter will charge, but it's going to be a pretty penny.
That's incredible, actually.
Well, one more point is to say, what's the value of the trophy hunting dollar versus the tourism dollar? And if the state of Wyoming were really looking at this with an economic
development
advantage in mind,
economic development,
the numbers are in. The trophy hunters do not spend what the tourists spend. We're looking at record numbers in Yellowstone.
So how do we stop this?
Well, at this point, there are multiple litigants who are suing the federal government to restore endangered species protection to the greater Yellowstone bears.
Okay.
And so that case will be heard in Missoula on August 30th. So it's in the hands of the Honorable Dana Christensen at his federal court here in Missoula.
Okay.
So we can just hope that that judge relies on the best available science. And to sum up the scientific piece, there's three main pieces from my point of view. One is, if we do not connect the greater Yellowstone population of grizzly bears with the glacier population of grizzly bears, right now their habitats are not connected, they're not interbreeding, we will lose this species. This is a tipping point situation. Those bears must be connected. Until they're connected, there should be no delisting. Secondly, there's two primary protein sources for the grizzly bear that have been drastically affected by, what do we call it? We're calling it climate change. Not really global, but climate change. And that would be the white bark pine, which is a seed that is a huge primary protein source for the bears, and also the cutthroat trout.
Okay.
So we're looking at primary protein sources being depleted, habitat getting encroached upon by humans. We don't work to coexist. We have a problem bear, we kill it. That's the problem. There should be no delisting.
It's amazing. We should be. Doug Leffler just posted something on his Instagram page today to talk specifically about this. Is he involved in this with the Love One project?
Right. He is definitely a huge advocate and friend of Grizzly Times, who is the group that hired Bonfire. He's got such a great platform and following, and is such an authentic, just compassionate person in the field of animals. I mean, you know his story, Scotty. I know his story. He actually should be on this show. He's an incredible.
Well, we can get him on a future show.
But you're doing a good job.
You're doing a great job. But
now,
you know
Blake, give me the other
yes,
side.
Yes.
Okay.
Why?
Yeah. Why?
Why would we allow? Forget the psychology of the individual
Sure.
who wants to kill a grizzly bear.
Okay.
Why are they allowing it? What's the argument for allowing it? They're beyond the critical extinction point.
So the argument is that at this point, the grizzly bear numbers are this big thing to celebrate. That, oh, this is a wonderful conservation victory. And look at how great Yellowstone National Park and the state of Wyoming have been doing to restore this iconic animal. They're positioning this as a victory. But what they're not doing is looking at the science. So they can say that it's all a victory. They can say all that. But it's just not true. Until those two populations are connected, we don't have true recovery. And the skewed science and the skewed vision comes from pressure from large multinational groups like the NRA, the Safari Club International,
right? So
Rocky Mountain Elk
what's
Foundation,
the money behind
Backcountry Hunters and Anglers? All of those organizations support this trophy hunt.
So when those organizations request for donations to make sure that you're allowed to hunt and that your freedoms are not being encroached upon, this is what they're going toward, is fighting something like the relisting. The relisting.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so it should be said, and I vehemently, I really believe in a lot of these organizations have done incredible work to secure habitat. Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, for instance, let's look at them.
Right.
So they're a local organization here to Missoula. They have a huge following throughout the state. It's my opinion that a lot of their members don't have any idea what they're really supporting. For instance, the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation has supported the aerial gunning of wolves. That is unscientific. It's removing apex predators from a system that's already very complex. It's indiscriminately killing off wolves. Secondly, they do support this grizzly bear trophy hunt. So while they've done a lot of things for the wellness of the habitat, they've gone off the rails, and they have former NRA leadership leading their organization at this point. And I think if you look at the current state of politics and the affairs and how these organizations are infiltrating the government, I mean, it's pretty obvious what's going on here. Trophy hunters want to kill these animals, and these organizations, especially the ones that have gone off the rails a little bit, are playing into that. That's not to say that all of the money that goes into these organizations is being used for bad.
They do other things.
Certainly not, and I wouldn't want to have that.
So how many are they going to be allowed to kill?
So in the state of Wyoming, currently it's 22 bears out of a potential population of 717. And it took 44 years.
That may be half of that.
Right, and it took 44 years for the population to get to where it is. There are rules in place, like you can't shoot a sow with cubs of the year. Okay, but any hunter is going to tell you it is virtually impossible to tell the difference between a male and a female grizzly bear in the field. Also, very sadly and unfortunately, the state of Wyoming is going to allow baiting not in all of the areas, but in some of the areas you're going to be allowed to bait. An ethical hunter doesn't bait an animal. That's not ethical.
Right.
Period. It's just not. And it's horrible for the whole ecosystem. All you have to do is a Google search on that. I mean, the information's there.
And what's going to happen in Montana?
Oh, thank God. The state of Montana has declined to host a hunt for 2018. I am beyond thrilled. And the state of Idaho, which also is part of this, that tri-state region, they are hosting a hunt to kill one bear. So think about the tax dollars that go into the public comment period, all the meetings that have to happen. I think that is a horrible misuse of tax dollars. To kill one bear for principle.
Got it. But the federal judge on August 30th here in Missoula, it just so happens, is going to be hearing the case, correct?
That's correct.
But for Wyoming, right? So that's
so it's a federal case, so he will decide for all states, not just one.
Right.
Yeah, the states individually held their own public comment periods and made their rules for the hunts, because the bears are currently under state management because they lost endangered species protection in July of 2017.
How did you meet your clients? I'm just curious.
Well, from my background at Patagonia, we have mutual friends, and they knew what they needed, and my other friend from Patagonia who I used to work with said, hey, you should talk to Blake. And so we did. And Louisa and David are amazing people. Grizzly Times.
And when are they going to be up here?
So we're going to do an event at the Roxy Theater. Dr. David Mattson, who is going to give a talk on basically the interdependence and the interland usage of bison and grizzly bears. It's intriguing and so interesting to think about how these animals have shared the land for so many years. And if you look at both the former habitat for bison and for grizzly bears, the overlap is really quite incredible. And so David's going to give a talk about this, having been a bear biologist for many years. That will be on August 28th at the Roxy.
Okay, so at the end of the summer.
Yeah, right before the case, because there's going to be a lot of bear people in town at that time. So we want to get everybody together.
So what we will do, what we should do around that time is have you come in to do talk back, and to talk on Peter and John's show.
Great,
to promote the event.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to understand this. So for 40 plus years, grizzly bears have been on the endangered species list.
Correct.
And then all of a sudden, they've managed, not all of a sudden, but over the 44 years, they've managed to get themselves up to 700 bears in 21,000 square miles. And now they've been saved. Right? According to somebody's determination, right? That they're not in danger of being extinct now by somebody's determination. And the first thing we want to do now is go shoot a bunch of them. They're not terrorizing people, right? They're not causing any, mass havoc anywhere.
They certainly cause trouble around livestock,
right?
And around people who are not educating themselves on how to live with predators. They see them as the enemy, and that's just a really backwards way of thinking.
But they're not going to hunt a specific bear because that bear has eaten a bunch of livestock.
Well, no, I mean, certainly. So the hunt could have been set up that way, but it's not.
To go after a bad bear as opposed to just
and there's
any
no bad
bear.
bears. There's just bad humans. There's no bad bears. Every bear conflict is human caused. If you're running livestock, it is your responsibility to deal with the predators in a way that is a win-win.
So, but what's their premise, or what is their argument to say we need to go after these 22 bears because of what? Like, what's the what? Because they're
look, the livestock industry is going to say because they eat
too many
calves.
of them.
They eat calves. They're a nuisance. There's so many, and a lot of the thing that I hear regionally is somebody will say, well, there's a lot of grizzly bears around here. And I say, okay, well, the rest of their range doesn't have grizzly bears. So why don't we, instead of murdering these bears, why don't we move them to their suitable range? And there's plenty of suitable range for these animals. Sure. So it is a great question. They've just, quote, recovered. And the first thing that the state of Wyoming and the state of Idaho are planning are trophy hunts so that people can feed their egos. And really what they need is a long period of therapy.
We are talking bear delisting here, and it's a fascinating subject. Our guest is Blake Nicolazzo from Bonfire Branding, who is carrying the torch, pun intended, on behalf of this movement.
Well, the whole concept of trophy hunting, has a lot of. I have friends who have trophy hunted.
Yeah, I do too.
I don't support it. I wouldn't do it. I hear the rationale for it. Right, the rationale in general usually is like with the giraffes. Well, there's too many. They have to thin the herd anyway.
Well, they just ended up on the endangered species list, so I think we can.
Yes.
But we don't kill what we love. That's really the one of the main points here is, a lot of the trophy hunters engage in the conversation by saying hunters have done so much for conservation, and if it weren't for us, then these local people would really just starve. And, in the case of Wyoming, the economy is based on tourism. It is not based on hunting.
Right.
Hunting numbers are decreasing nationally. We are seeing that. So this is just, they can sing and dance around the issue as much as they want. When it comes down to it, murdering an innocent being is not leading with love, and we don't kill what we love. We don't.
That's true. And, Arnie, it's funny because I bet you know some people that are on the other side of this. Sure, I know
people who went for lion hunting in Africa.
And like do you ever talk to them about that? Like what it takes, why they do it, and what's the feedback?
Well, it's a combination of things. One, it's allowed.
Right.
You can do it, right? So
permissible.
It's permissible. Secondly, it's the hunt. it's not easy. It's it's considered a trophy hunt.
Right.
It has all the rigmarole around it. It's exciting. They're hunters. They're following the rules. It's allowed, and they want to do it.
Right.
So that's their choice. It's not anything to do with anything other than it's allowable, and that's what's happened with bears.
Right.
They're now just got to the point where they're able to survive and not be endangered, and people immediately, a certain portion of people, want to go out and kill just for sport.
And unfortunately, in a lot of these cases, we are going to see sows with cubs of the year.
You're gonna find
what does that mean, cubs of the year?
18,
that they just born this year.
Just born, okay.
Yeah, and so basically the science says that a bear cub needs a minimum of 6 months with its mother. So if the bear was born in the spring or early winter, in the den, right? If the bear is born at this point, like there's 3 cubs of the year. Their mother was hit by a car out by, I think it was, actually I don't want to say where it was because I don't know for sure the town. But these 3 cubs were set to be, I hate it when people use the word euthanize when we're murdering. Like euthanization is putting something out of its misery.
Right.
This bear sow was killed by a car, and her 3 cubs were going to be killed because they were too young to survive on their own.
Right.
So thank God they did find a place for them, but they will never be wild.
Well, we had the same kind of argument around the wild horses and what needs to be done with them, and some people want to go and kill them, and and there's arguments on both sides, but that they weren't going to go trophy hunting them.
No, they round them up and slaughter them.
Yeah, they round them up and slaughter them. It's a little bit different.
But all of this goes back to, and it's very interesting because today I noticed that Trump pardoned the Bundys for their actions in Oregon. And if you follow the money and if you follow the trail and the sentiment behind all of this, it all goes back to grazing rights. It all goes back to cattle on the land that's public land in many, many cases. And the bears get in the way of that, the bison get in the way of that, and the horses get in the way of that. So I think as a nation, we need to look at our values and say, wait a minute, this culture of death, cattle ranching, okay?
Right.
It is what it is. It's a culture of death. They birth you to kill you. End of story. It's horrible on the environment. Now, when the cows are out in the middle of the ranches in Montana, I bet they're happy. They're eating grass. They're with their family. They're fine.
Right.
That's not what I take issue with. But what I take issue with is all of these wildlife conflicts go back to cattle.
Right.
But cattle are not, they are not indigenous species here.
Right.
They did not originate here.
We raised
Bison
them to kill them.
most certainly did.
Right.
Bears most certainly did. So, what are our values as a nation?
And the argument's going in the other direction. You're fighting an uphill battle.
Right. When we got 2,500
trade wars.
Well, we got
about this.
We have 2,500 kids in cages.
Right. We have
so
2,500 kids in cages.
Somebody might make the argument, say, "Well, we have a lot of extra kids. Let's go hunt and kill them."
Oh, good God.
Our
cattle are going to be taxed now. Further taxed.
Yeah.
So this cycle of death is now going to be taxed even further.
Well, if you were to tax things based on their total effect on the economy, right?
Right.
So, like, you buy a T-shirt for $3.99 at Walmart, but what does that T-shirt really cost when you look at it on a global scale? And what's the end life of that T-shirt? What's the end life of all these products and all these things that we buy?
Right.
It's just all really, wasteful. And how wasteful is the cattle industry? And I'm not putting down the industry as a whole. I know plenty of ranchers, and I love them. And I told the ones who do it right, but maybe meat doesn't need to be that big a part of our diet. Maybe it's something that is a little more we use more sparingly.
I don't know. That cheeseburger sounds awful.
Cheeseburgers are delicious. I get it.
But people are raising, cowboy cricket farms raising crickets for protein.
Right. And the UN made a statement several years ago now saying, dear world, you need a different protein source. Right. Let's look into bugs.
And the folks at Cowboy Cricket Farms kill the crickets humanely.
We've had them.
How did they kill the crickets?
They put them into stasis. They lower the temperature and they go to sleep.
Oh.
And then they harvest.
And then they grind them up or something?
They make it into powder.
Right. They don't even know they're dying.
Yeah.
They were sleeping.
And that's
just the way I want to go, by the way. Put me to sleep and then grind me up.
Noted.
Make sure Linda knows.
Yeah, exactly.
So Blake, the folks at Patagonia, you spend a lot of time there. Talk a little bit about your career with Patagonia, because
that informs your some
because
of your
that really
it does. It shaped
things.
me in a huge way.
Tell us about that a little bit, because I'm always fascinated with that. I've seen that manifest itself through a variety of different conversations and events.
Yeah, I mean, I knew from a young age that I wanted to work for Patagonia. I stole a pair of pants from my brother. They were ski pants, and they were amazing.
Right.
And I remember the first moment I saw the Patagonia label. So I knew that I wanted to work there, so I did. And when you work for an organization like that, there's a lot of conversation that kind of blows your mind. In the beginning, my first 6 months of Patagonia, it was like I felt really overwhelmed by all this bad news. And that is something that I think a lot of nonprofits and messengers fall into, is like, I'm going to hit you with all this bad news. But the thing that Patagonia, one of the things that I learned was, you can hit me with all the bad news you want, but you got to give me a way out. You need to give me something to sign. It can't cost a lot of money,
right,
and it can't take a lot of time, but it has to engage me in the process. And, there's so many sayings that came out of Patagonia, but one was, we get the government we deserve. And I think we're in such an interesting point right now in American culture and history. We really have been so, apathetic. There's stuff happening that we feel defeated. We feel like we don't have a voice. We don't have the ability to make change. So that was one big lesson from Patagonia around, you can hit me with everything you want, but give me a way out. And so that's a really good piece of advice that I give my clients in
both
terms
literally
of trying to
and
make a difference.
figuratively, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The experience. Go ahead.
Have you ever visited Patagonia?
No. I've been to Patagonia headquarters in California many times. No, and it's cool. Actually, Patagonia has an internship program where you can leave your job and go to when Chris McDivitt Tompkins, who founded Conservation Patagonia in Patagonia, they've just gifted a massive amount of land to the government. She actually just met the Pope recently. So that's the caliber of people that I was working with in Patagonia.
Right.
It's just your game is just upped.
Right.
And you're
right.
really,
when you have a business that has an
conversation.
ethics underpinning as opposed to just a profit underpinning.
Right.
You have to you become engaged in what is the philosophy of what you're doing more than just the business of what you're doing.
And then you by showing your values and who you are, you're attracting your tribe per se. You're attracting other people who say, I like where they put their money. I like how they use their action. I mean, the whole Bears Ear situation, the government can attack Patagonia all they want. They're only going to make more fans of Patagonia.
That's right.
So in a brilliant PR move one time, so Patagonia supports a tremendous amount of nonprofit, environmental, grassroots organizations. And one year they supported Planned Parenthood. And it was very controversial among certain people, of course. And so Patagonia gets a phone call that we're going to picket your stores because you supported Planned Parenthood. So Patagonia turned around and brilliantly said, go ahead and send all the picketers you want. For every picketer that shows up, we'll donate $5 to Planned Parenthood. So it's this incredibly intelligent group of people just turning things around to end up in their favor, And I honestly trust Yvon Chouinard and his wife. He and Melinda still own the company. I trust him implicitly. He is an incredible human being, and I was honored and graced to be in his presence.
How long were you there for?
6 years.
Right, in New York, or was it?
Some in New York and some here. I had the Montana, Wyoming territory as a wholesale rep. So I was a Patagonia rep. It was my dream job.
And she's turned me and my whole family into Patagonia people. I think we came that way anyway.
Well, you should be.
But we are now. We're brand loyal.
Well, and we're super lucky that we have the outlet in Dillon. If you want to see some of the nicest, coolest people in the world,
I was just
whether
there.
You're on the phone or in person, they are a tremendous group of people. I love them.
It's again, if every retail establishment was like that, people would be going into retail.
It would be profitable because it's profitable for Patagonia for sure.
It's like a restaurant. When you walk into a restaurant, Arnie, and the people don't know what things are made of and what type of bagel, what this is being served. This is where it's sourced from. You know how you like going to restaurants like that? It's the same thing here. they're so well informed. You're just like,
they know their stuff.
No, and I've been.
I don't mind paying more.
The only thing to do in Dillon is to stop.
That
not anymore. It's coming up. I'm digging Dillon these days. It's a great spot.
So Blake, but Bonfire Branding really, so they get involved in things like this. But yeah, your pedigree is Patagonia, and that's to your point. That shapes and informs kind of how you approach business and life, for that matter.
For sure.
So the Matsons,
David Matson and Louisa Wilcox. Yeah.
So they're going to be coming to Missoula at the end of August, right?
Yes.
For this. And what can we do as a community to show our support, right? Like, what would you like to see the community do to say, hey, we hear you, we appreciate what you're doing. Here's, besides going to the Roxy for a talk.
Yeah, and we'd love to have the Roxy nice and full because, gosh, David's talks are amazing, and he's just such a wealth of information. And I know here in Missoula, we do have a large population of people who really vehemently care about wildlife.
Right.
But in terms of what people can do, you can go to grizzlytimes.org and you can donate. It's really not a glamorous job to be the science behind a lawsuit. You can go to grizzlytimes.org and you can actually just donate to this cause. You can, go to follow Grizzly Times on Facebook and Instagram. We put out alerts pretty regularly about actions that people can take. And then also you can speak directly to the state of Wyoming and the state of Idaho. You can actually support the state of Montana.
Should you call your congressman?
Well, so should the federal case land in our favor, this hunt will not go forward and the attacks will continue. People really want to see the bear delisted so that we can trophy hunt it. So at this point, it needs to be in the hands of the federal judge. We have faith that the judge will look at the science and that this case will
What do we know about the judge?
I know I've actually testified in front of Dana Christensen. I think he's a fair judge. I think he's well trained. I think he looks at all of the material and facts. Mm-hmm. And in the cases that I've seen him adjudicate, he's I think by and large made the right decisions.
Okay.
So I think you got a good judge in terms of whether it's going to go one way or the other. I don't know, but he will not treat this frivolous.
He'll give it the fair shake.
Yeah,
I agree. I went to the initial hearing here in Missoula this spring, and I was impressed with his court. I thought he was
he's a good
fabulous,
guy.
And actually the attorneys that are arguing this case on our side are out of this world. Honestly, I'm going to be in the courtroom, and I would urge people to come. I think it's a part of American society that we very rarely see.
Right,
but
if you've never seen a federal case being handled, it's well worth going to, and Judge Christensen's court is as good as any to go take a look at what's going on.
Yeah. So, there is a movement afoot right now to purchase hunting licenses. And
not use them.
So shoot him with a camera is the campaign name. I cannot personally endorse that because, there's some pieces there like I couldn't tell somebody to do that because I don't know if you could get in trouble with the law. I can't clearly say, but there's a pretty big movement afoot right now that if you apply, so say we apply for hunting licenses and we agree not to kill a bear, it'll be paid for you, $6,000. To buy that permit.
So the theory there is buy up all the permits and then don't hunt.
Right. Yeah. Which, honestly, at the end of the day, we've got to have a long-term approach.
Yeah, that's not really a solution to the problem.
But you know what? Here's the thing.
Speed bump.
It will matter. It will matter for that individual bear that doesn't get killed in that 10-day period. So, I honestly, I'm kind of like whatever it takes at this point because this is absurd. This is really wrong.
August 28th is when Dr. Matson is doing his speech.
Yes.
It's not a speech, but he's doing his presentation.
At the Roxy.
Yes. And then when is the judge? Do we know when the judge is going to have?
August 30th, right?
August 30th.
So 2 days later.
Yep, is when, I don't know how long that proceeding will be. It could be one day, it could be more. I'm not sure.
And the hunt is scheduled for when?
The season, it's either September 1st or 15th. I've heard both dates, but it will go until November 15th.
Oh my gosh, so the timing is, it's
he specifically said, I'm going to rule on this case before the hunt because everybody needs an answer. Right. So, he did the right thing there. He's going to
rule in one day.
Yeah, we'll see.
If it's September 1st.
Yeah, so we'll see.
That's a Saturday, so that's plausible, right? That is the day. Or no, the 15th could work too. It's a Saturday.
Well, and it's interesting, like the resistance piece to this. Tom Mangelson is a brilliant nature photographer. He recently was featured on 60 Minutes.
Right.
And then I read an article, and the ending quote is from him, and he said something to the effect of, if you look at what happened at Standing Rock and how people came together to resist, if this hunt proceeds, you can expect something else, and it's going to be called Standing Bear.
Yeah.
And I will be there. We will be there. I mean, we will resist.
Aren't you amazed that over the last 18 months since our current president's been in office, just the desire to protest and for people to come out en masse for everything?
On both sides.
On both sides.
Yeah.
But on both
it's great.
sides.
We're waking up. This is part of evolution. We must wake up.
We kind of made our beds, too. We kind of...
And we did. And the fact is, this is another funny thing about Yvon Chouinard and Patagonia. Like, he does so much to preserve and restore the natural environment. But if you ask him, is it too late? Sometimes he says, yeah, it's too late. But I'm going to die on the right side of history. And that's more me. Yvonne never said that to me. But that's, for me, I'm just like, look, guys, like, let's die on the right side of history here. Let's not go out being totally selfish and lazy and lame. Mm-hmm. Let's lead with love.
Well, it's just frustrating to have, the leadership by minority. I mean, the folks that are making decisions, I mean, from the election on, we all know this, and, we don't want to rehash it all, but, more than a third of the country didn't vote. Trump lost the popular vote by 3 million. I know the opposition will say, well, those were all in New York and California. But he lost the popular vote by 3 million. He didn't win the popular vote.
Right.
He won the electoral vote by 88,000 votes in 3 states combined. It was an anomaly, actually. And he's empowered a minority of the country to set policy and to set directive.
And to steamroll.
Almost in every single case, whether it's killing bears or Planned Parenthood or children in cages or not, or dreamers, or letting people who are naturalized citizens be denaturalized and removed. Majority of the country doesn't support those positions.
Well, and I think that gets to the heart of a lot of this, which is when the people fear the government versus the government fearing the people. And we really are fearful of the government at this point with all of the actions that are being taken, whether it's at the border or even get down to like local police brutality issues. Sure. This did not get born with Trump. It has certainly revealed itself on a deeper level.
I blame Al Gore. No, I'm serious. I blame Al Gore not fighting
harder on the hanging Chad.
On the hanging Chad.
Oh my God.
I really do, because that set everything into motion. We're ready to.
He was being, and sometimes on the Democratic side, the criticism of being too nice and let's all heal the country and all that kind of stuff. He should have been tougher. If roles were reversed, they would have never done that.
No, they're steamrollers. We're not.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and that has been brought up many times, is like, that basically the level of aggressiveness with which people attack a situation. Like a lot of times the aggressor wins. But, all in all, when we look at this, look at dark money. Look at what truly controls politics. If the NRA weren't so entangled with our political system, we would have a few different situations. And this trophy hunt is being driven by NRA money. They were in the courtroom at the hearing,
right,
applying to be an intervener in the case along with Safari Club International. So they're applying to be an intervener on the side of the DOJ.
Right.
They can then put their resources into that court case. So we've got to get big money out of politics. There's a lot to do here,
Good
friends.
Luck with that.
And what do? Does it go to revolution? Is that what it's going to take? Is it going to be when everybody's suddenly offline, we get hit? There's a war. I mean, what is it going to take?
Well, so this past weekend I saw Cory Booker at an event. And I was looking at him, and I kind of, I'm from Jersey. I gave him the Jersey nod.
Right.
And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I hope he doesn't run for president.
Right.
Because he's going to suck the oxygen out of the room. But he's not. He can't fight with Trump. He can't fight with these people. He can't go toe to toe with them. You need somebody who can go toe to toe and fight fire with fire.
Or do we attempt to, I mean, and this is, you guys will laugh at me a little bit, but what about leading with love? What about establishing a movement that says when you're making decisions, is it courageous or is it fearful?
Right.
Because there's a lot of people who are waking up.
We led with love back in the 60s and early 70s, which you weren't part of, but I was around, and we ended up with Richard Nixon.
Yeah, I hear that. But at the end of the day, like, Americans have to make choices. There's convenient life. There's easy life. In my opinion, so people say, oh, my gosh, there's going to be so many more grizzlies. They're going to snatch kids off porches. And I'm like, wake up. We used to have to be fearful of giant wild animals that could actually kill us in a heartbeat. We need to wake up and learn how to survive. We need to learn how to coexist with apex predators, because when the wild things are gone, we are nothing. We are nothing without the things that are wild. And so it's a big, complex thing. But at this point, I mean, my intention is to preserve some grizzly bears.
Putting aside,
you just did a metaphorical flip the script on us. I like that.
Right. She's very passionate. Blake is very passionate about this, and it's clear where her loyalties and her passions lie.
Oh, for sure.
And if I just want to look at it factually, here's the part that is the most disheartening to me. You in 44 years, you restore a species just to the minimum level.
Right.
That says, okay, they're not going to be extinct anymore, and then you're going to kill them.
Right.
You're going to allow people to kill them.
Right.
We just have enough Jews in the world. We just have enough,
He's right.
I mean, and so now it's okay to kill them.
Right.
That's what I can't get. Instead of, the celebration is good. You celebrate that we now have 700 or 1,000. Doesn't matter to me if it's 2,000. Over thousands and thousands of miles. They're not going to die off, but we're going to help them die off by having a hunt.
We're going to celebrate.
And I don't see the rationale other than pure, avarice.
Yes.
I'm rich and I want to kill a bear. I want to be the first one in 44 years to kill a bear in North America.
I think you're right, and I agree with you, and I think Blake's right. We got to work with love, because if you could get that same group of people speaking off of that script,
to use their power for good,
for love, to be like,
they'd laugh. They're going to laugh you out of the room,
and that's okay, because it's going to take a long time.
Yeah, but
let's just push.
Thing that can change.
Yeah,
it's the only thing that can change. Listen, let's take a quick break, okay? Let's throw to a commercial.
Oh my God.
This is a good time. It's a good segue.
Yeah. Take a long walk off a short pier.
We're going to pick up about love after this break. Our guest is Blake Nicolazzo. You're listening to What Do You Know on KGVO. Back after this with some final words. Okay, we are back.
Scott almost delisted himself off of the chair here in the massive studio.
Where did this chair come from?
Have that removed.
All right, please.
It was delisted, and therefore it attacked you. So tell me, Blake, about Bear 399. I mean, these bears there are still so few of them that we know them by name or by number. Right. So tell me about Bear 399.
Yeah, so she is just such an incredible story. So Bear 399 is a highly productive female bear. These are the slowest reproducing animals on our land. So Bear 399, I think she's about 21 years old. She has had she's had a hell of a time keeping cubs alive because of humans, basically. But, this year it was particularly beautiful when 399 emerged from her den with cubs. And last year, she actually had 2 cubs, and one was hit by a car, and she dragged that cub off the road. And it was a very horrible, horrible scene and situation, as you can imagine. These animals are sentient beings. So 399 is both a blessing and a curse, because tourists in the Jackson area can see her. I mean, she's seen on the regular. I actually posted a beautiful video of her, the first sighting of her on Jackson Lake with her cubs. The curse of being Bear 399 is that she'll be a target for trophy hunters.
Right, because she's a known bear.
Yeah, and these guys want to get the famous bears. Now, she is a sow with Cubs of the Year, so she's not supposed to be taken, But like I said before, it's almost impossible to distinguish between a male and a
Sure,
female.
when you're 500 yards or 1,000 yards away with a high-powered rifle.
Yeah.
Right.
But she's a great story in that she has persevered and has actually produced cubs at a very late stage in her life. She's 21 years old approximately, and she has Cubs of the Year. So, and she's just a neat bear. She's famous.
It's like shooting Bambi.
Yeah.
I love Bambi.
Yeah.
Oh,
Wow.
there she goes.
Yeah, she's a really neat case, and actually,
Terrible.
the 60 Minutes feature that had Tom Mangelson, the wildlife photographer, on it recently. You can find it on CBSNews.com. That is a great interview with Tom Mangelson, and he talks about $3.99.
Well, what website can they access that through?
It's actually on grizzlytimes.org.
Okay.
It's actually on the homepage because it's just such a great piece.
I saw
so you
it.
can see it through there. And there you can also check out Louisa Wilcox and Dr. David Matson's work and see, I mean, there is a wealth of information on grizzly bears on grizzlytimes.org.
Blake, give us some milestones coming up the next couple of weeks. We have the 28th of August, which as we get closer, we'll promote it as well. But
Thanks, yeah.
that's the Roxy Theater where Dr. David Matson's going to speak,
Right.
and talk about
30th of August is the
court
federal case in front of Judge Christensen.
And then anything else we should be on the lookout for
I mean,
the next couple of weeks?
Yeah, I mean, well, between now and then, it is really a huge amount of work to support the scientists and the attorneys in the litigation. So that's a lot of what David and Louisa are spending time on. They talk to the press constantly. And so they really need support for their work. I mean, daily I am setting up stuff for David and Louisa.
Let's have them in.
Yeah, we'd love to. They'd love. Then yeah, they can come.
We can have them in. If we're around that week, Arnie, we should
Sure.
maybe have them in.
Sure.
That'd be good, right?
Yeah, it's this is the type of thing where there's a lot
Fascinating.
of people in the world who really want to do the kind of work that we're doing. We're activists and artists and I've got a doctor friend who's like, Blake, when I think of what you do, that's what I want to be doing. So how about I give you money
Right.
so that you can continue doing what you're doing,
Right.
and I can continue making my living. And so that's kind of who we're looking for right now. We need
Right.
help. We need help.
All right. Well, look, if we can be helpful in any way in any fundraising efforts, we're happy to do that, as you know.
Thank you.
Okay, and we'll put the power of the stations behind it too.
Blake, it was great seeing you again.
Thank you.
I really am envious of your passion for all of this, and hopefully it will work out the way you want it to.
All right. Thanks, Blake.
Thank you, guys.
All right, Arnie, I will see you next week.
Next week, Scott. Take care.
Okay.